"John, what are you doing here?" In the middle of the night, feeling that I heard a noise from upstairs, I went up the stairs and bumped into my husband coming out of our daughter's room. He seemed surprised to see me.
Oh, I heard the noise too and went into Emily's room. She was crying because she had a nightmare. So I was comforting her.
Would a daughter, who usually keeps her distance from her father at her age, really be comforted by him just because of a nightmare? It was a somewhat unconvincing explanation. After that, my husband's visits to our daughter's room at night became more frequent. Whenever I asked what he was doing, he invariably said that Emily couldn't sleep and wanted him to stay with her. In the morning, my daughter started to yawn constantly and became increasingly groggy due to lack of sleep. And I noticed she seemed to have put on weight around her waist. When I confronted my husband severely, Emily spoke up.
"I've been putting up with it, but I can't take it anymore. Listen to this."
When did you get your hands on such a thing? You ain't great.
With a trump card she played, my husband was cornered and had no choice but to admit his wrongdoing. "My name is Lena. I married my college senior, John, and we had a daughter, Emily. John adored our only child, Emily, more than anything and often took good care of her since she was young. Emily also grew fond of her father and would often go out to the park or other places with John, even when I wasn't around. When I was busy at work, especially during peak seasons, John would willingly take Emily out to amusement parks or other fun places. No matter how busy he was, John always made sure to attend school events like Emily's Sports Day or Parents' Day. In a world where many men prioritize work over taking care of their children, I am constantly grateful that I married a man like John, who could be called a true hands-on dad. However, as Emily reached her upper elementary years, she began avoiding John, possibly due to her sensitive age.
Hey Emily, how about we go out somewhere together for a change? We could go shopping. I'll buy you something you like.
On a holiday, while Emily was watching TV in the living room, John suggested this.
I'm fine. There's nothing I particularly want right now."
Emily, who has become somewhat mature for her age, recently started feeling embarrassed about going out with her father. Even today, when invited by John, she seemed reluctant and turned down the invitation.
I'm going out of my way to ask you. And this is the attitude I get.
John, perhaps upset by Emily's response, suddenly scolded her. John probably wanted to get along well with Emily, but he often missed the mark, not quite understanding how to handle a growing girl. And he would end up getting angry when things didn't go well. "Hey, don't be so angry." I hurriedly intervened to calm down the heated John. The arguments between John and Emily were not just on this day. When John spoke to her, Emily often responded with a curt attitude. John was shocked by the change in Emily, who had been so affectionate before, but I didn't think much of it, seeing it as a sign of her growing up.
She wasn't like this before.
Well, she's getting closer to being an adult. Don't get so worked up about it, okay? I tried to calm down my husband, who was grumbling in dissatisfaction, without paying much attention to it. But I never thought that my response at the time would be something I'd regret later. If I had paid closer attention to the two of them here, maybe the later incident wouldn't have happened. With the relationship between father and daughter remaining awkward, Emily entered the 6th grade. She grew taller and completely looked like a young lady. Though she had many friends and a cheerful personality, lately she seemed a bit out of sorts. When I asked if something was bothering her, Emily just shook her head, indicating nothing was wrong. Even after contacting the school about Emily's condition, it appeared there were no significant troubles. One night, while I was sleeping in our bedroom, I suddenly noticed John stirring and then getting up. He stood up and left the bedroom. I wonder if he went to get some water. Glancing at the clock on the bedside table, it was midnight. Feeling wide awake, I tossed and turned, unable to fall back asleep. Even after a while, John had not returned to the bedroom. Puzzled but eventually overtaken by sleepiness, I fell asleep again. Were you awake last night? In the morning, while preparing breakfast, I asked John about last night.
Well, I couldn't fall asleep. So I was in the living room.
If you're waking up so often at night, maybe you should see a doctor. Even when I suggested this, he said there was no need because it wasn't bothering him much. Then one day, I noticed John getting out of bed and going somewhere again. At the same time, feeling thirsty myself, I got up from bed following my husband. Heading to the living room, I found it pitch dark and empty. Where's John? Thinking he might be in the bathroom, I didn't worry much and just filled a glass with tap water to drink. As I was about to head back to the bedroom, I suddenly thought I heard a noise from upstairs. Could Emily be awake? With that thought, I went up the stairs. Then I bumped into John coming out of Emily's room. John, what are you doing here?
Lena, you're awake.
John seemed surprised to see me. Is something wrong with Emily? I came up because I heard a noise.
Oh yeah. I noticed the noise too and went into Emily's room. She was crying because she had a nightmare. So I was comforting her.
You've been on bad terms with Emily for a while. Did you make up?
Even if she acts distant, kids love their parents. She's calmed down and is sleeping now. So let's go back downstairs.
Could Emily, who had been avoiding her father so much, really be comforted by him just because of a nightmare? It was an unsatisfying explanation, but urged by John to go back to sleep, we went down the stairs and returned to our bedroom. After that, my husband John started leaving our bedroom at night more often to visit Emily's room. When I asked what he was doing, he always said Emily couldn't sleep and wanted him to be with her. I also asked Emily if that was true, and she said she was the one who asked her dad to come. Emily is a girl and sleeping with her dad all the time. Plus, wouldn't it affect your work if you're up all night, John?
No, I'm fine even if I lose some sleep if it's for my sweet daughter. Right, Emily?
John answered nonchalantly and looked to Emily for agreement.
Yeah.
However, Emily's face, even as she agreed with John's words, looked clearly troubled. I stopped prying further, thinking if both were okay with it, but I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was wrong. Then, in the mornings thereafter, Emily started yawning incessantly, showing signs of sleep deprivation, and often seemed absent-minded. Even her grades, which used to be top-notch, began to decline, causing concern not just for me but also for her teacher. Hey Emily, is something bothering you? You seem pretty distracted lately. I asked, worried about her health, but Emily just laughed it off, saying, "It's nothing, Mom, you're overthinking it." Then, 6 months later, I noticed something when I went to pick up Emily from her tutoring classes. Children were coming out of the entrance as classes ended. And among them, I spotted Emily. Viewing her from the car, I realized she looked fuller overall, something I hadn't noticed because we were always together.
I'm exhausted. Today was test day, so it was tough.
Emily said as she got into the car. You worked hard. You must be hungry. I'll get dinner ready as soon as we get home.
Yay. I love Mom's cooking.
Hey, you say the nicest things. Speaking of which, Emily, have you noticed any changes in your figure recently? You seem a bit fuller. At my words, Emily's expression froze for a moment.
Yeah, I've gained weight recently, and my skirts and shirts are tight. I've also not been feeling well.
Really, I'm sorry, I hadn't noticed at all. It might be something serious. Should we go to the doctor tomorrow? I had noticed she looked a bit absent-minded and sleep-deprived, but it must be serious if it's affecting her body. As I spoke anxiously, Emily's face suddenly brightened, and she forced a smile.
Just kidding, it's a lie. I just wanted to make you worry a bit. Maybe I'm just tired. It's really nothing. Forget about it.
My daughter's attempt to dismiss her previous statements only made me more anxious. Could it be? Emily's clearly unnatural behavior made me feel like I understood the cause of the unease that had been building up. When we arrived home, I found John just as he was angrily ending a phone call.
Stop making ridiculous accusations.
He hung up the phone with a look of indignation. Who are you on the phone with? You seemed pretty upset.
It's nothing, just a wrong number. Don't worry about it.
John brushed it off with a laugh and said he was going out for his usual walk before leaving the house. Emily's condition, John's behavior. Feeling that something was amiss, I checked the phone John had been using to talk to someone. This number is. Searching through the call log, I was puzzled to see the displayed phone number. It was Emily's school number. Why would John show such anger? What were they talking about? And why lie about it being a wrong number? With a growing sense of unease, I felt I had to check and call the school. Identifying myself as Emily's mother, I inquired if something had happened concerning her. It turned out that John had been talking to the school nurse just before. The nurse answered the phone and explained. Hearing this, I was speechless with shock.
During a recent physical exam, we discovered that Emily had developed shingles all over her body. We suspect it's due to stress, and I had just discussed this with her father, but he abruptly hung up, insisting that his daughter was fine.
The nurse's tone was quite urgent. Despite this, why did John adamantly deny it? His unusual behavior made me suspect that the changes in Emily's health might be connected to him. I knew I had to uncover the truth immediately. Thinking this, I made a request to the school nurse. She agreed to help, considering it was for Emily's sake.
I'm home.
We need to talk.
What's with that serious face?
John, oblivious to my grave demeanor, just chuckled. The person you were talking to earlier was the school nurse, right? Why did you lie about it being a wrong number? John looked startled, probably not expecting me to call the school back.
Well, you see, you worry too much. I heard the story, and it wasn't anything serious, so I didn't bother telling you.
Nothing serious? How can you be so sure?
Emily is clearly healthy. Saying she's sick is just a baseless accusation.
John became defensive and argued back at my words. Baseless? Emily is showing signs of stress on her body. Don't you have any idea why her health might be changing?
That's a baseless accusation. I don't know anything. Emily isn't saying anything either.
Not saying anything? Who's been threatening her to keep quiet? I talked to Emily about everything while you were out for a walk. Pretending not to know won't help anymore. After hearing about Emily's condition from the school nurse, I immediately talked to Emily. At first, Emily was tight-lipped, but after I gently persuaded her, she tearfully confessed. Emily had been coerced by John to sleep in the same bed with him at night. Although it might be different when she was younger, Emily is now in the 6th grade. For a girl her age, it's naturally uncomfortable to be forced to sleep with a man, even if he is her father. Initially, Emily resisted. But John shouted that it was bad parenting on my part if a daughter wouldn't listen to her father, and he threatened to divorce me and kick me out of the house if Emily didn't obey. Not wanting me to be driven out, Emily reluctantly complied with John's demands. However, just the thought of sleeping next to John made it hard for her to breathe, resulting in stress-induced shingles all over her body. The symptoms of shingles include pain throughout the body, making it difficult for her to sleep. And when she did manage to fall asleep, she'd often wake up to dreams of her father yelling at her. The reason Emily looked drowsy and distracted all the time was that she couldn't get proper sleep. Emily revealed that to alleviate her stress, she had been getting up at night and secretly eating food from the refrigerator. That's probably why her body shape changed so suddenly.
Did you spill everything? I told you not to tell anyone.
While yelling, John tried to grab Emily. I quickly jumped in front of Emily to protect her. I won't let you touch her. Stop hurting her anymore.
Hurting? So exaggerated, huh? I didn't anything sketchy. Just sleeping together represents only a physical affection. What's the issue with a father sleeping with his daughter?
Emily clearly didn't like it. She's showing physical signs of stress, and you still force her. To think that someone who ignores his daughter's feelings could be a father is laughable. I can't continue with you anymore. Overwhelmed by his selfishness, I lashed out in anger, and John began to panic.
Oh no, please forgive me.
He seemed to realize the gravity of the situation now, but it was too late. I could never forgive John for hurting our daughter. I won't forgive you. The only thing you can do is disappear from Emily and my life.
No, it's not like that. I just wanted Emily to be as affectionate with me as she used to be. Don't abandon me.
John collapsed to the floor, sobbing. Emily and I looked down on his pitiful figure with cold eyes. After hearing more about it, John said he felt inferior every time he saw other fathers at school events bonding well with their children, wondering why his daughter was rejecting him.
She used to be such a sweet, obedient girl, always following me around, calling me dad. And then she suddenly became cold, which made me feel lonely.
Focusing only on yourself and ignoring your child's feelings. Are you even a father? A girl distancing herself from her father is a sign of growth. It's natural to feel lonely, but you're supposed to endure it and keep watching over her. John started believing that Emily's rejection of him was because of her mother's poor upbringing, justified himself as wanting to correct the wrong education, and pressured her to sleep together at night. He probably thought spending the night together would return them to the close father-daughter relationship they used to have. Initially, John was facing his own stresses at work, being held accountable for problems by his boss, and dealing with young subordinates who wouldn't follow instructions. He lamented that other employees were bad-mouthing him behind his back, and confessed he sought solace in his interactions with Emily. I was utterly appalled by his selfish reasoning. I understand you were stressed from work, but to alleviate that stress by pushing our daughter to the point of making her sick, that's unforgivable.
It's just a form of parent-child bonding. Admittedly, it might have been a little embarrassing, but that's exaggerated to be called it as a stress.
Still saying that? Fine, let's have a third party explain what Emily's condition really is. Saying this, I picked up my smartphone and made a call. Shortly after, the doorbell rang. I welcomed that folks in and led them to the living room.
Hey, what do you think you're doing? Just waltzing into someone's house like that?
The person I had called was the school nurse, who had been waiting nearby to explain Emily's condition. As planned, the nurse arrived accompanied by staff from Child Protective Services.
Emily is clearly showing signs of stress, a cry for help.
The nurse stated firmly to John.
That's an exaggeration. Anyone can get shingles. It's just a sign of being a little rundown.
Despite the nurse's explanation about Emily's shingles, John consistently claimed, "It's not my fault." Before such a stubborn John, Emily stepped forward with a determined look. having decided something while watching the situation unfold.
Being threatened to drive mom out. I've endured it until now, but I can't take it anymore. Listen to this.
Emily pulled out her smartphone and started operating it. Then John's voice began to play from the smartphone. Just like she said, that was an audio recording of threatening, telling her he would get me out of the house unless she slept with him.
What? How did you get that? Trying to frame me? You ingrate.
John, not expecting Emily to have recorded the conversation, started to panic and berate her. But no matter how much he denied it, there was no escaping the truth now. After listening to the recorded audio, the Child Protective Services staff asserted that the cause of Emily's ill health was clearly her father. Being told by a third party that he was the cause, John was shocked into silence. You were using Emily as an outlet for stress. From now on, I won't forgive that kind of thing. No way? As I declared that, John slumped dejectedly. That night, Emily was temporarily taken into the care of Child Protective Services. Leaving Emily with the school nurse and the CPS staff, I was left alone in the house with John. I reiterated my demand for divorce to John.
Hey, reconsider this whole divorce thing, will ya? I admit I may have pushed her despite her reluctance, and I'm reflecting on it. So, I'm gonna turn over a new leaf from now on.
No matter how much you resist, the divorce is final. Do you think Emily wants to live with you after all this? Neither Emily nor I can continue with you.
No, I refuse. I will never allow divorce.
Despite my explanations, John refused to accept the divorce until the very end. This conversation is just going to stay at an impasse if we continue like this. Realizing we were getting nowhere, I declared that we would proceed with the divorce through a lawyer. As I packed my things, John tried to stop me, but I brushed him off and left the house. I couldn't bear sharing the same air with him any longer. I decided to stay at a hotel for the night and planned to pick up Emily from the child services the next morning. John called many times after that, but I continued to ignore his calls. There was no point in talking to someone so unreasonable. I blocked John's number. Eventually, he kept resisting the divorce, and we had to hire a lawyer to proceed with the negotiations. With this school nurse's testimony and the recognition of John's repeated harassment of Emily, the divorce was finally granted. Of course, I won custody of Emily. John stubbornly insisted on visitation rights, but when I threatened to demand a substantial amount of alimony, he reluctantly gave up. I heard through the grapevine that John remained in the house we left, but the shock of the divorce seemed to drain his will to work, leading to his dismissal from the company after continued absenteeism. He reportedly lived a disordered life until he could no longer pay for utilities, resulting in a cut-off of services, and eventually, he had to sleep in public parks out of necessity. While I pity John's situation, considering what he did to Emily, I cannot forgive him even now after the divorce. I will likely never see John again. As a single mother, life with Emily began anew. Freed from John, Emily slowly regained her former cheerfulness. Now she's immersed in French pop culture with her friends, even aspiring to study in France, focusing on learning the language, and has finally returned to her bright self, which brings me great relief. Though challenges lie ahead, I'm committed to raising my precious daughter and protecting her smile. That's the vow I made to myself.